My name is Dr. Richard Clayton. I'm a security researcher here in the computer laboratory at the University of Cambridge, and I've contributed chapter 3, which is about the technical aspects of surveillance. If we now move to the online world, this is a little bit less obvious for people to understand, and it's distinctly newer. But some things are obviously very straightforward to understand. If you have an Oyster card and you travel on the London Underground or London buses, then London Transport has a record of every time that Oyster card has been used going back over several years. The vast bulk of the population also carries around a mobile tracking beacon in their pocket. A mobile phone regularly communicates with the nearby phone mast to say, "Here I am, have you got any messages for me? Are there any incoming calls? Have you got any text messages for me?" And that basically creates a record. There's also no difference if you use email for your communications, because the email providers also have to keep records, they're obliged to by law, of who you're sending emails to and from, and that information can be obtained. The second thing, besides the idea of DPI, which the Communications Data Bill has been proposing, is what they call the filter. Now, this is a very strange name for what is basically a big data system, whereby they are going to process all communications data in parallel in order to be able to pick out patterns. But what it comes down to is that you record absolutely everything which is going on just in case. So all data about everybody, innocent or not. You then process stuff which might be relevant about people, innocent or not, in order to produce the subsets of data which might be relevant, and then you combine them together. And that allows you to do things like asking a question. I have seen a suspect talking on his mobile phone in this criminal conspiracy, and I saw them on Reading Station last Wednesday, and I saw them on Edinburgh Station last Tuesday, and this morning they were sitting at King's Cross, right? So you can now process all of the data of all of the people who are in those locations in parallel, and you can look not just at mobile phone data, but you can also look at email data, internet data about events which occurred at those physical locations, combine them all together, and hopefully you'll get a list of only a handful of people who are in all of those locations at the same time. In the end, what we have to do is we have to look at these systems and say, is it appropriate to give the police all of these powers and all of this data processing ability, right? Are they going to use it for good things? And the difficulty, which certainly I have with this, is it's going to be very hard to tell whether or not what they're using it for.
I'm Professor Peter Sommer. I'm an academic specialising in cybersecurity, but most of my income comes from acting as an expert witness in the English courts. I act for both prosecution and defence, and I look mostly at digital evidence, and that includes surveillance type material. We're now past the 3/4 point in terms of access to the internet in the home and ownership of personal computers. All the time evidence is being collected in digital form, which is of great value to the authorities. Law in a country like Britain has to operate on consent. People have to believe and trust in police and in the intelligence agencies to behave properly. The general understanding on how they operate really dates back 30 or 40 years to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. Now, what has happened recently is that the capability of the state, as a result of changes in technology, of carrying out surveillance have just changed out of all recognition.
My name is Duncan Campbell, and I've contributed the first chapter to the OpenRightsGroup book on the Communications Data Bill. I'm concerned about communication surveillance as an investigative journalist. I've been working on this subject for most of my career, starting with providing the first ever article to describe what GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters in Cheltenham, actually did. It was extremely controversial at the time in the 1970s and attracted in due course a prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. for many years, although the people who spoke to the parliamentary joint committees that investigated this bill didn't seem to know it, there was no such thing as communications data. In the 1980s and even early in the 1990s, telephone exchanges, which were all we had, unless you had a brick-like mobile phone, were huge, clunky, electrical pieces of equipment that simply couldn't store that kind of information at all. So the ability to get, if you're an ordinary person, an itemized phone bill, or if you're a police person or an intelligence officer, a list of who calls whom, is completely new in our experience and came much later. The fact is that modern media and modern communication systems provide far more information, including geographical information and freely shared information on social networking sites, that hugely add to what's available. So what we're looking at is a wolf gobbling up data in the clothing of sheep, of claims that it will reduce crime. These are the serious concerns that underpin my and many others' oppositions to this bill in its present form.
We shouldn't be building systems like that, giving them to the police and saying, please don't use them that way, we want you to use them just to investigate serious crime. Because in practice they will use them for whatever seems to be appropriate at the time, and it's going to be very difficult for us as a society to even understand that they're doing that, let alone speak up and have something done about it.
It seems to me that what one needs to be doing is a fundamental reassessment of surveillance law to look at how the balance actually ought to operate. In order to achieve that balance, you need an informed public debate and probably some form of royal commission, maybe not a royal commission, some other form of inquiry will help the public understand what is possible and then arrive at that sensible determination of balance. Patching up legislation, I don't think is going to work.
The key principles should be transparency and accountability. That is to say, if information is obtained by about a person in due course, howsoever the information has been obtained or for whatever reason, they should be able to find out who got their information. If it's important, maybe not for a week, a month, a year, but in the long term to know and to be able to deal with any damage and to challenge the legality. And secondly, to prevent the frivolous and improper use of information, that should be accompanied by a strict punishment regime for people who leak the information or who obtain the information about private individuals for an improper purpose.